Good afternoon. I formally declare open this meeting of the Colac Otway Shire Council, 13th of December 2023 at 4:01 p.m. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the true welfare and betterment of our community. Amen. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of the land, their elders past, present, and welcome any descendants here today. Please be advised that this meeting is recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of the meeting. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. I note that all councillors are present. Moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire Council encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meeting. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time at council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention before 5 p.m. on Monday the 11th of December 2023. No requests were received. I have received questions in writing from James Judd, Jane Goss and Stephanie Goodlett. These questions will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive management team. In accordance with sub-rule 56.6.3 of Council's governance rules, an individual written response will only be provided to questions that have not been read out today. All written responses will be available in the minutes on the Colac Otway Shire website once confirmed at the following council meeting. Before we move on, can I have a show of hands from those in the gallery who might want to ask a question today? Thank you. Jane, thank you. Questions submitted in writing. James Judd, number 1. The council has set a rent per annum it will receive from the operators of the Lake Colac Holiday Park, but this is dubious if council will not end up having to pay the operators per annum, as the total amount quoted also includes a state government charge that must be deducted from the total payable. So, if the fire services levy equals or exceeds the total rent council will receive, nothing or could actually have to pay the operators. So the total payment only equals the rent set. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The rental amount for the Lake Colac Holiday Park lease is significantly higher than the fire services levy charged for the property, and is not expected that the fire services levy will ever be greater than the rental amount for the property.
Question 2 from Mr Judd. How many dollars did the Colac Otway Shire Council obtain from the Victorian State and the national governments to upgrade the child's play area at the Memorial Square in Colac? Now that access is to be restricted for at least 5 months due to the toilet upgrade at Memorial Square, with added risk, urgent access to the toilets will not be available in an emergency from the play area within months from when council claimed works were finished, the new play area. Plus, what access to the toilets and shopping used to justify council's claim for these funds, because if challenged and found guilty, council could have to promptly pay back in full all funds it had received with a possible extra penalty added. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Council received a combined total of $550,000 from the federal and state governments to redevelop the Memorial Square's play space. The new Memorial Square toilets are being built adjacent to the existing toilets, meaning there will be continued access to public toilet facilities in Memorial Square. The existing toilet block will be demolished after the new facility is operational. Access to the play space will still be available whilst the toilets are being redeveloped.
Number 3 from Mr Judd. Will the Colac Otway Shire ever provide a safe place at Memorial Square in Colac in the event of inclement weather? We used to have the bandstand that had a roof and you could retire there out in the rain if it was not being used. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. There are many places in the vicinity of Memorial Square and more broadly in Colac that could be used for temporary shelter from the rain during a storm event.
Question number 4 from Mr Judd. When was the old Shire of Colac broken up so the Colac Township became a separate municipality that later became Colac City Council that went out of existence during 1994? With the city offices in Ray Street, now the Colac Otway Shire offices, plus the Colac Otway Shire Council offices in Murray Street, Colac, now a medical clinic near the old post office and district sorting facility for all mail that has been for years a Chinese restaurant. Response from General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. On 19 January 1938, the town of Colac itself split away from the Shire of Colac to form the Borough of Colac, which was later proclaimed on the 26th of January 1960 as the City of Colac. On 23 November 1994, the Shire of Colac was abolished, and along with the City of Colac, the Shire of Otway and parts of the Shires of Heytesbury and Winchelsea was merged into the newly created Shire of Colac Otway.
Thank you. Number 5, will the Colac Otway Shire Council ever issue a definitive list of its proposed works that will impact the Colac region and state by when the service will be delivered? These projects have long been promoted by Council. The extension of the centre strip on Murray Street, Colac down to Armstrong Street, the Colac 2050 growth plan, when little has been done to make sure it will ever be possible to introduce it. Just earmarking land that could be developed is nothing until services actually can be definitely provided. The future planning of this region is handicapped as long as no definite knowledge of when works will be done is provided. Plus, every time we have a change of government, either at state or federal level, all promises of allocations are subject to review or cancellation. As well, some of the council's forward planning is based on many election periods before they will be done, including one with at least 10 election cycles forward from when announced it would be done. The state has changed laws many times since the Colac 2050 growth plan was announced about who and how much will have to be paid on lands rezoned and released for sale, with the Shire now low priority in collecting money after the state collects its charges. When the Colac Otway Shire Council has persisted in claiming it is from monies received from developers that will pay for services to be provided, when the truth exists that no funds may be available once the state takes its claim. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. Council has a range of adopted strategies and plans that require external funding to be delivered, one of which is the Colac CBD and Entrances project, which proposes that streetscape improvements be extended from Corangamite Street along Murray Street to Armstrong Street. The Council advocates for funding under appropriate state and federal programs as appropriate for implementation of these plans. Council is actively implementing the Colac 2050 growth plan by undertaking the Precinct Structure Plan PSP for Deans Creek growth area west of Colac. Council undertook an amendment to the planning scheme in 2019 to change the town boundary of Colac to reflect the outcomes of the 2050 project, and is now undertaking technical assessments as part of the PSP process to establish a detailed plan for the growth area, including future urban layout, identification of supporting infrastructure and development contribution plans to enable funding of the required infrastructure. The PSP process will result in urban zoned land that facilitates planning applications for subdivision. Council has separately supported rezoning of land in 2022 and 2023 at Irrawillipi Road and Colac Lavers Hill Road in Limonite to facilitate subdivision for housing. All of these initiatives will result in development contributions to assist in funding new infrastructure in Colac in future years.
Thank you. Question from Jane Gross. On 30th of November 2023, I submitted a question on behalf of the Old Polar Bay Community Voice to CEO and councillors regarding the Regional Precincts and Partnerships Program Stream 2 Precinct Delivery Grant Opportunity, along with the following link. I had stumbled across this grant opportunity and wondered whether Council had considered preparing a master plan and business case to build a 50-60 place childcare centre at the early years hub in Apollo Bay. Given $5 million is the minimum amount per application, would this project not be eligible? It would be a great solution to childcare crisis in Apollo Bay, would not require the sale of any land, and would fulfil Council's commitment to advocating for childcare for Apollo Bay. Having received no answer to the email, I am submitting the question again to Council. Response, Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Jane, through the chair. You may recall, Jane, that I was actually an apology to a meeting on the 30th of October, and at that time I told you I was preparing, under a very tight deadline, an exciting housing project, but I didn't name the funding program. And that was actually, I was working on application with partners to the Regional Precincts and Partnerships program in the hope that it might be assessed in the first tranche. So that was what I was working on at that time when we couldn't meet. The application relates to two sites, one in Colac and the other being the council land in Nelson Street in Apollo Bay. So these are housing precincts that we've made a partnership application for. And if successful, the two sites will move to an investment-ready state for affordable and key worker housing, but also hopefully in ways that are translatable to other communities. So we have our fingers crossed. So that's the application we've made to that program. And cross your fingers and hopefully we have a great outcome.
Question from Stephanie Goodlett. My questions are in regard to item 9.7, Community Asset Committee's annual report. As a regular user, cleaner and mower of the Apollo Bay Seniors Hall and a member of the Asset Committee, we believe that running costs, cleaning and maintenance tasks that Council believe are being provided to the hall are inaccurate. Regular users would be happy to work with Council to gain accountability around these concerns. Council asserts that they spend nearly $40,000 on the Seniors Hall in Apollo Bay annually, with half of this on cleaning and the provision of soap, etc. The cleaning is part of a cleaning contract for the wider local government authority. We do not feel the cleaner attends the venue regularly. If at all, regular users purchase soap, toilet paper, hand towels, bin liners, etc. I ask that Council be more responsive to concerns and request the cleaners provide dated and times of attending the site to clean so that users can reasonably assess the cleanliness in consideration of the day it was undertaken. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. Council notes the concerns raised regarding the standard of cleaning at the building. We agree that times and dates of cleaning should be recorded and will remind the contractor to do so. Please continue to let us know if you believe that the contractor is not meeting their obligations and will take appropriate steps under the contract.
Question two. As a member of the Apollo Bay Senior Citizens Asset Committee, I wish to clarify that we did not provide activities and performance information for this report, as we are yet to sign the instrument of delegation or even begin negotiations with Council regarding the agreement and our responsibilities. As volunteers, we were provided with a list of requirements beyond the manageable, asking us to undertake tasks Council have not completed themselves in the 5 years I have held playgroup at this hall. Council suggests $1,200 is spent on the garden annually, but cannot show actual expenditure or tell me when supposed garden works were undertaken. Since 2018, Jane McGregor and myself have regularly mown and weeded the hall. The garden was created and funded by Landcare. As a ratepayer, I have concerns about the lack of transparency of works undertaken, funds spent and accountability in following up on concerns these tasks are not done. I ask that councillors request a thorough investigation into all community hall finances, budget and actual spending, as well as the current asset management processes, requirements and the feasibility of the tasks asked of volunteers. Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you through the chair. So officers do agree that the Community Asset Committee model in the form intended under the Local Government Act 2020 is proving difficult to implement, and we will seek to discuss this with councils in the new year, and to make sure that discussion is beneficial to councils, we'll make sure that we compile as much financial information as we can.
Thank you. We now move on to questions from the gallery. But before we proceed with questions from the gallery, can I remind everyone that question time is for questions only. It's not a forum for public debate or statements. When asking a question, can you please state your full name for the minutes? Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, Jane Gross, long-time resident of Apollo Bay and president of Apollo Bay Community Voice. I have a question regarding the sale of 69 McLaughlin Street and specifically about the fourth option in Ian Surin's report in the agenda today of gifting the property to the community. Are you aware that if councillors decide to proceed with the gifting option, that the community understands that this decision would absolve council from further responsibility for the building or the site, and the community would not expect financial assistance from council in the future for the site or for the building. Furthermore, having spoken to a solicitor, the community has been advised that the most suitable legal entity for ownership would be a charitable trust with respected citizens as the Board of Trustees, and that would take an estimated time to set up of approximately 90 days. It would be achievable. So the question is, are you aware of these facts?
Like to answer. Mr. Surin.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Jane. No, we weren't aware of that detailed information, so thank you for sharing.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the gallery? No. We'll move on to petitions and joint letters. A petition with a total of 730 signatories was received from the Australian Services Union on 7th of December 2023 in relation to community care services. The purpose of the petition is to urge Council to continue direct delivery of this vital community service, providing care from council workers to vulnerable and older residents in their homes. In accordance with clause 57.11 of Council's governance rules, if a petition or joint letter relates to any item already on the agenda of the Council meeting at which the petition or joint letter is submitted, the Chair may decide that the petition or joint letter will be dealt with in conjunction with that agenda item. We now move on to item 6, and I'm asking for declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Mr. Sheeran. Councillor Arnott,
Sorry, Mark, I have a declaration of interest in regards to the Opus review.
And your conflict?
Conflict is that I have a family member in receipt of services. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Finnegan?
Yes, I'd also like to declare a conflict of interest in relation to the Opus services review. My sister works within the service.
Thank you. Item 7, confirmation of minutes. Oh, Mr. Sheeran, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd also like to declare a conflict of interest for item 9.1, a general conflict of interest as a close family member is employed by council in the OPAS unit.
Thank you, Mr. Sheeran. We'll move on to confirmation of minutes. I propose that we move to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday, 22nd of December 2023 and the unscheduled council meeting held on the 6th of December 2023. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. So Councillor Hart moved, Councillor Potter second. Is it to be opposed? Not to be opposed, thank you. We move on to officers' reports. We have 2 councillors who have declared conflict with this item, and we will give them time to leave the chamber. Thank you. Now we move on to that item. The best value review of Council's aged and disability services is a challenging but important piece of work for our council staff and community. Those who've looked at the agenda will see we are needing more information before we can properly consider what the future direction might be, and I really appreciate there's been a lot of contribution from many people. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the progress of the best value review of age and disability services. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Hart, second to Councillor Potter. Thank you. Is it opposed? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This is obviously a very important set of services that are provided through council. I note that what we're doing today, or what the recommendation is, which I've moved, that quite rightly we're thanking the people who have participated in this process, and I also thank the people who have signed the petition that's been tabled today, but there'll be a final report provided to Council the 28th of February 2024, and that's obviously going to be a very important matter that we consider at the February meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Potter?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I echo what Councillor Hart said, and just thank the CEO for bringing this report as well, just to show the community that councillors are continuing to be involved in the process and have some oversight. The process is continuing, but it's appropriate this time of year perhaps just to provide this update that the review is still underway and there'll be a final report next year. And again, thank everyone who participated in the survey, made their contributions and signed the petition.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Any other councillors wish to speak? No? No. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? No one. Carried 5-0. Thank you, councillors. Now we move on to item 9.2, sale of McLaughlin Street, Apollo Bay, consideration of community submissions. And it's to consider submissions on the potential use of council-owned land at 69 McLaughlin Street. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mayor. And can I flag that I have a alternative to the...
motion.
A motion to put, please. I'm just... Can I ask how many times... Oh, that might be a bit unfair. Is it correct that for the last at least 3 years, council officers have continued to lobby various levels of government to establish a new childcare facility in Apollo Bay, and what has been the results of that?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, that is correct. Officers and obviously councillors as well have been lobbying other levels of government to try and address the childcare challenge that we have in Apollo Bay. Obviously, we have a childcare challenge right across the Shire, but particularly in Apollo Bay. So we have done quite extensive work in advocating for some support to address that issue, particularly around the Best Start, Best Life policy reform by the state government, where they announced 50 state-run childcare centres. Unfortunately, Apollo Bay wasn't one of those 50 centres, which we just found out quite recently.
Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following on from that, in the 50 centres that state government funded through its ongoing Best Start, Best Life initiative, funded 50 centres in various locations. In any of those locations, did the municipality have to make a contribution to those centres?
Through you, Mayor. To my knowledge, none of the centres have actually started yet. They're focusing on 4 out of the 50, and we don't have any understanding or knowledge of whether local governments have to contribute financially to those centres or not. At this stage, all they've done is announce the 50 sites.
Follow-up question.
And in our discussions with, was it the Victorian Schools Building Authority who are running that initiative, I think, and did they suggest that we might have to make a contribution?
I might respond to that one because I know that I've had direct conversations with the Department of Education and also the early years departments around this program, and there was no indication of a requirement for any contribution. The key considerations in the allocation appear to be more around the socioeconomic status of the communities and the level of demand, and largely that was through waiting list. They were the 2 things that were spoken about most often with me. The discussions with the state government did also indicate support for facilitating conversations with the federal government to seek infrastructure funding. There was no discussion around council having to contribute, but the federal government may have asked for that if we'd gone down that path.
Other councillors got questions? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Just a question to whoever can support the answer, please. The money that was spent, $348,000, which I assume was outside of council budget, assumed to be recouped on the sale of 69 McLaughlin Street. How will that impact on the council's forward budgets for projects that are in the priorities across the Shire?
I'll respond to that one through the chair. Thanks, Councillor Arnott. It will, if not recovered, it will simply mean that council has $348,000 less to put to another project. In the context of the long-term financial plan, it would probably be potentially a renewal project that doesn't get done because we are struggling already to fund our renewal program. So that would be probably where you'd see the impact.
Councillor Potter, did you have a...
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just picked up a comment by the CEO, and I just thought, for the sake of the community, I'll just explore that. CEO, you did mention with your talks with the state government around waiting lists and the link to the CEFA index in relation to securing childcare. And is it right that you've approached government or where you can to ask for them to review that to try and open up consideration for Apollo Bay to be suitable for a childcare centre?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Potter, through the chair. Certainly we drew to the attention of the people we were advocating to that sometimes looking at these challenges at too high a level really masks really local challenges, and I think that is potentially what we've been trying to reveal with Apollo Bay, that when you look at a broader level, things don't look the same as when you dig into actually here's a smaller locality. And so we have advocated that they take a closer look in more detail to see where the challenge, and I think where the challenge really might be more not masked, we've conveyed that through a number of pieces of correspondence at a minister level, at the department level, etc. And I think we'll need to continue to show that Apollo Bay itself is quite unique in its challenges.
Any Councillor Costin?
Thank you, Mayor. In the officer report, there's option 4, which is gifting of the site to the community. which seems to be similar to our gifting of the Penny Royal Hall to the community. How did we, what conditions did we put in place to ensure that the Penny Royal community didn't just sell the hall off to a private buyer?
Mr Sheeran?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, when council resolved to do that, part of the resolution was that there'd be an agreement with the established committee that the hall be only used for public use. And my understanding is that agreement has been done via through written correspondence.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. Just adding a bit on the $348,000. Has council's current budget assumed that $348,000 would be coming into to council in the current financial year and thereby formed its budget on that basis?
So I'm happy to respond to this one through the
Thank
chair.
you,
Councillor
CEO.
Hart, my recollection is that the budget adopted by council for the financial year 2022-23 did actually incorporate an expectation of asset sale income because council had resolved to sell the property. Okay, that didn't happen in 2022-23. When we were preparing the budget for 2023-24, I removed that assumption.
Any other questions? Councillor Costin.
Just following on that 348,000 also, it seems that we'd already committed that money in the 21-22 budget because the early years hub, including the maternal and child health centre, was being built already at the time we went out for consultation. But we hadn't decided to sell the property to fund that at this time. How were we going to fund it if we didn't sell the property?
CEO.
Yeah, okay, me, thanks, Councillor Costin. So council had indicated through a resolution in 2016 an intention to contribute to an early years hub and indicated that it would consider the recovery of those funds through the sale of McLaughlin Street. Clearly I wasn't here for conversations between 2016 and 2021, but when I arrived, that still appeared to be the intention. And the budget that you're referring to, so because council would have at that point actually formalised an agreement with the state government about a contribution to the early years hub, the lease, the land, etc. Having signed, I would assume, those kind of agreements, it was appropriate for council then to formalise its contribution. In terms of where that would come from, it would have just been prioritised over other projects and effectively had to be funded from council's operations at that point in time, because the property clearly hasn't been sold, hadn't then and hasn't.
Any other questions? No other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Potter?
Yeah, Mayor, I did flag that
You did.
I want to move a motion and we should have some words for that prepared, I think. It's in relation to option 4 in the officer's report.
Is that the motion that we're seeing? Is this the one? Anne?
That's the motion, Mayor. So I wish to move that.
Councillor Potter, that's the motion you wish to move that we can see up on the board?
Yes, I just said that, Mayor.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hanson. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, we all know the history to this, and historically the community raised the funds for this particular property and handed the property over to council. and in recent years it's operated as a kindergarten, which became too small and too unserviceable. So in partnership with the State Council, committed $348,000 to a new early years hub. A condition of that arrangement at the time, and agreed to by the community really, was that the council would sell the property and recoup that investment. It was further agreed to by council to isolate the balance of the sale of those proceeds to achieving a childcare outcome. Childcare, or lack of it, is a statewide problem, but it's a particular issue in Apollo Bay, and in my view ranks second to the homing challenge as a major factor in obtaining employment and growth in the community. So what we haven't done, councillors, is sell the property, and we haven't been able to achieve a childcare outcome or contribute in some way to the state or the federal government in achieving a childcare outcome for the future. In the meantime, we have been petitioned and lobbied by the community not to sell the property, but to repurpose the building in the absence of the ability of achieving a childcare outcome. We've asked the Apollo Bay community via the Apollo Bay Voice to put before us some options for us to consider as to what to do with the property. One of those options is, of course, the original council position to sell. The community have put forward an option for council to effectively gift the property back to the community where it came from, for them to repurpose it and address the needs that they've identified that exist in Apollo Bay now and moving forward. This doesn't recover the $348,000 the council did spend in the first place in relation to childcare. I believe in the returning of the property to the community. It allows the community the ability to address their needs. It gives them ownership and self-determination as to the community, and it removes for council any current and future liabilities in relation to the property. But in my view, I think it needs to be made clear that this takes away any cash for achieving a childcare outcome, takes away any money to be available in future for the maintenance, repairs or redevelopment of this particular site. It means council will continue advocacy, yes, but financial contribution, no, in my view. It's a significant investment in the Apollo Bay community by council. It gives them back to the property that they started with. And the mechanics of the handback haven't yet been fleshed out. However, we did hear from Jane Gross from Apollo Bay that they have a plan for that. The formation of a trust, charitable trust by the community, and that can be done within the next 60 to 90 days approximately. So I think this is a good option. It achieves a community outcome. It doesn't achieve childcare. It doesn't get council back $348,000. But I think this is a sensible and proper response to the community requests and the lobbying of council by the community.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Costin, you reserve. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. I oppose this motion. I won't be supporting gifting the McLaughlin Street property to the community for a number of reasons, and I guess the main one being that, and this is why this is very different to the Penny Royal Hall. We didn't actually spend $350,000, or we didn't give $350,000 towards building a new kinder in Penny Royal. It's actually a very, very different scenario. But what is similar is you've actually got two buildings that are not needed by council, and that's probably the only thing that's positive about this motion, is that it actually does recognise that this building is not needed by council. We recognise that this building is excess to council's needs and not needed, and we do not need or want the future costs associated with this building. I think it also recognises that it would be very difficult for council to ever afford, or even the pipe dream, I guess, of the flexi hub that has been put out there by the community. That's probably a multi-million-dollar build. The main issue I have with this motion is that, with a click of a finger, or when councillors put up their hand, we're just foregoing the value of this property. It is owned by the entire Shire. It will have a big impact on our budget. It hasn't gone through the budget process. It hasn't, gone out for public discussion, gifting this, for general public discussion, gifting this to a trust, or we don't even really know what it is. Councillor Potter says in his mind it means that there'll be no future funding towards childcare. Well, is it or isn't it? Like, what's... that's in his mind. We don't actually know any of these things. Sometimes things are said in the chamber and forgotten very quickly. I think this also just goes against, I guess, the goodwill that was there around, council and council officers working with the community, advocating 7 or 8 years ago around getting what is the best outcome, which is the new kinder and maternal and child services down at Apollo Bay, the best one in the whole Shire. And part of that deal was that we would make this contribution, and that would come out of the sale of the kindergarten. And now, the community has reneged on that, which, I think this at least should go through a budget process. It's really not particularly transparent to the whole community, because people are only going to find out about this after it's happened, after the fact, the broader community, which I, just think is a really poor outcome. So the only positive thing about this is it does get rid of a noose around council's neck, which is this old fibro building that council just doesn't need the future costs of.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan and Mayor White. Look, I'll acknowledge that childcare services do exist in multiple positions within the hub, or within this, or hubs within the community, and so that attached to the kindergarten we have such a childcare service. So I'm not sort of wedded to that needed to be provided or not. Yes, it did need to be provided. If a block came up in Apollo Bay and the community needed a strategically placed block in the middle of the town to consider its future use, and the cost of that to council was going to be $348K, when the real cost of the land around there might be some circa 700 or 800 grand, I'd jump at it. So in that context, I think that this is possibly a reasonable purchase if we look at it in that context. There is a lot of community momentum and goodwill around this, and I think it would be nice if we could harness that, or at least provide the opportunity for the community to harness that goodwill. But let's not pretend it's a good building. It's not. It's just about the block of land. It's all about its position, position, position. I am concerned about the impact on future projects and the impact of budgets. I do acknowledge Councillor Hanson's comments, and I do not dismiss them in the context of this conversation. And I think that's something that we're going to have to flesh out for the future. Having said that, I think this is a once only opportunity to make this decision. It's not an easy one. The community of the Bay have rejected our idea that the value of this could be carried forward to leverage childcare. So be it. I'm not necessarily agreeing with that as the best approach, but I do think that holding this block of land possibly is a good outcome. So with that said, I would support the motion.
Councillor Finnegan.
Still making my mind up right until the last moment there. This has been a pretty sensitive topic that's consumed my entire time on council, to be honest. And something we've gone back and forth over a number of times. I understand the concerns of the community down the bay and the like. The availability of suitable land, suitable buildings that could go into community ownership and the like to facilitate whether it be a childcare outcome or other community use outcomes are minimal. And this site provides a potential solution to that issue. And I am sympathetic with Councillor Hanson's points that, you know, this hasn't gone through the budgetary process, and I was wondering whether or not to move an amendment to hold this off until we saw this through the budgetary process, but I could see that going down like the Hindenburg. So I do begrudgingly support this in the sense that I do feel it is somewhat unfair on other parts of the Shire, but I do see a sensible outcome in agreeing to hand this over for community use, provided that we do not put $1 more into the site and the community understands that this is their project from here on in, and it will be up to them to fund what they want to do with the site. So that's where I sit on this one.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This suggestion, which I support, of Councillor Potter's resolution came out of the submission period that we had in the last few weeks, so I think that was an appropriate process. I do want to address this issue of the budget. As we heard, the $348,000 that was to be, if you like, contributed back to council's finances, it wasn't assumed that that would happen in the current budget. So that part has no current budget implications because the current budget has not been formed on the basis that that $350,000 is realised. As for the other part, there's been talk about disadvantage other areas of the Shire, but council's already agreed that if it sold this building, the amount in excess of the $348,000 would be retained for Apollo Bay in childcare. So other areas of the Shire aren't disadvantaged if that doesn't go ahead. If anywhere is disadvantaged, then arguably it might be the Apollo Bay community because those excess funds will not be available in cash. So I just wanted to address those aspects. Apollo Bay community has demonstrated their ability to manage projects such as these. Some of the people who have been actively involved in this issue were actively involved in the Apollo Bay pool, and that was a great outcome. Eventually that was a heated pool with a limited contribution by council, and in this sense this motion means the limited contribution by council has already been paid, and it's the $348,000 that went to the kindergarten. I will be supporting this. It's my preference that this resolution is adopted today. However, I am going to foreshadow that if it's lost, I do have an alternative resolution, which, if you like, is only my second preference. But I urge councillors to support this, to have confidence in the Apollo Bay people. They've demonstrated their ability in the past, and I think that's quite clear what the intent is from Councillor Potter's resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillors? Councillor Costin, you're reserved.
Thank you, Mayor. Gifting this property back to the community could help council achieve good outcomes for the community, and not just the current community, but future generations also. Gifting would recognise the history of how the community came to own, how a council came to own this property, and we could use it to leverage community resources to deliver community uses that we know we need, whether it be housing or flexi hub, meeting rooms, meeting spaces, allied health services, or the like. The property was effectively gifted to council in the 1950s when a preschool committee was formed. They purchased the property and raised money through community donations, fundraising events, loans even, and state government grants. The committee kept meticulous records, and these show that the Shire of Otway at that time somewhat reluctantly agreed on the 13th of November 1957 to accede to the committee's request to take over the freehold of McLaughlin Street. And that was for the committee to be eligible for a loan to build a kindergarten, and particularly for an infant welfare service, which was the first infant welfare service in the Shire of Otway. And council was somewhat reluctant at that time. They asked for the land to be free of encumbrances, which meant the committee had to pay for street charges, about £77. It required the committee to pay the full 1/3 of the grant contributions, which was quite a significant amount, and the full amount of any cost overruns and all future operation, maintenance and repair costs. That's what the council required of the community. It also required that the committee pay back council the money, the £200 that it received in the purchase price, to pay for council's costs associated with the loan administration and building supervision. In effect, the committee never saw the £200 that was paid by the Shire for the transfer of ownership. This history leaves little doubt that 69 McLaughlin Street has been a substantial windfall for our council, and in part it explains the local community view that the property should be retained and used for community benefit rather than sold. It also shows what this small community can achieve through its own resources and state or federal funding. And we've seen this community effort and funding repeated many times since, and most recently in the roofing and upgrade of the Apollo Bay pool. Despite our best efforts to date, we've been frustrated in the use of this property to deliver childcare or housing. We're constrained by our limited staff and our own resources, and we've been unable to attract the interest of Homes Victoria and the Schools Building Authority.
Time, Councillor Costin.
One more. The Apollo Bay community has demonstrated many times that it is a capable, motivated, resourceful and responsible community.
Time, sorry, Councillor Costin. I think we clearly understand.
That should be able to realise the full
coming
potential of this property if we gift it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Closing statement, Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks, councillors, and I do respect the arguments raised by Councillor Hanson, but we have heard, and I did say that this was a community asset at the start. I think it is practical to return to the community so that they can realise and repurpose it for their needs. If this land is sold and in the future council is obliged to find land and build another facility, well, we just won't be able to afford it. And the $340K already expended by council has been a magnificent investment in the Apollo Bay community already, and really it was an investment into a $3 million bill, which has just been fantastic. The rest is paper money, really, and I think that this saves the ratepayer future expenditure in relation to this property. And we heard earlier today's meeting about expenditure of 550 odd K on toilets in Colac and 380K on a playground facility in Colac. Council's job is to spend money across the Shire, and we are careful with ratepayers' money, as we should be. I think this is a good use of ratepayers' contribution, and I think this is a good response to community needs.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? Against? Division? All those in favour? Councillor Potter, Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Finnegan. Against? Councillor Hanson, Councillor White. I think we might call for a quick break. Do we want a quick break? Do you want to keep going? Oh, you've got to go. Yeah, Kate's got to go. Sorry, I forgot that. We'll move on to the next item. We might have a break later. Sorry, Kate. I forgot about that. Yeah, so you've got to go at 5:45. Yep. Okay. All right, we'll move on to item 9.3. No, we're not going to have a break because Kate's got to, yeah, I'd forgotten, sorry. Now we move on to item 9.3, social housing at 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac, to seek council endorsement of the proposal by TW Projects for the establishment of a social housing at 36 to 52 Bruce Street. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Finnegan.
I'd like to flag I've got an alternative motion. And when the time comes...
Have any questions?
Yeah, I guess if I could ask a question, just in relation to the the original sale contract, one of the conditions in that, as I understood, or one of the options was for council to provide this land to achieve, or council to be provided this land to achieve a social housing outcome. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor. The contract requires the developer to do one of two things. It doesn't express a preference for either. It provides the options for the purchaser. The first option is to provide 3 blocks of land and more than 500 square metres to council for council to then facilitate a social housing outcome. The other option for the developer was to develop 3 dwellings for social housing on those properties.
Follow-up question?
And bearing that we're now into this stage of the process, could council now express a preference to the owner of the land to sort of pass on the land to council, over, like one option over the other, whereby they would pass over the land to council so council could pass it on to an organisation to facilitate a social housing outcome at no cost?
Mr McNeil.
Through you, Mayor. The developer's expressed its own preference to develop the houses in partnership with an agency rather than providing those blocks free of charge to council. We believe as officers that the contract provides those 2 options to the developer without council having the final say as to which one of those is adopted.
Councillor Hart. Sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. Does the proposal that the developers put forward involving the developer being paid any money for the blocks of land? And do we know, can we just clarify how much that is, if that's the case, please?
Through you, Mayor. My understanding is that the developer is looking at partially retrieving some money in terms of selling the blocks to a housing provider for a heavily discounted rate to recover the cost for the servicing of those blocks. My understanding is that that would amount to something just under the $100,000 per lot.
Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you. Is there anything stopping council today from expressing a preference for the option that expressing a preference that the lots in question be handed to council before, so council can then facilitate handing those over at no cost to the provider mentioned?
I'm happy to take this one through the chair. Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. As Mr McNeil said, there are 2 options made available through the contract of sale. They're made available to the purchaser without council having put any preference on that or final say on which option would be could be deemed to satisfy that condition. So council can certainly, through resolution, express a preference, but it would only still be up to the purchaser to decide whether they were happy to take that approach or not.
Follow-up question, Councillor.
So and just for clarification's sake, if council were to say we prefer this option, we could state that for the record. We could seek to put these housing providers and put social housing first rather than the profit motive. And then if the developer decides to go against that, that could be the developer's prerogative, but the council would have at least put its position forth. Is that correct?
Council can express a preference through resolution.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. The developer TW Projects are proposing to partner with Housing Choices Australia to develop these community housing or disability service housing, and they propose to use a entity called Disability Housing Limited to purchase the blocks in those terms that you've talked about. Can you provide some background of the association of those two entities, that is HGA and DHL? And also, is this a common sort of practice, just so for the community's view and understanding of how this works?
Through
Mr.
you,
McNeil, thank you.
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question. It's not unusual for organisations to, within their company structure, have a range of different entities that help them deliver their services or product, and that might relate to the fact that different states have different requirements through their regulations relating to those, or it might be that they're delivering different products through different entities. In this particular case, Disability Housing Limited is a subsidiary of Housing Choices, and it's aimed predominantly at servicing disability housing.
Thanks, Mr. McNeil. Any further questions?
Just so, we're confident or comfortable that they have the capacity to deliver the services for NDIS and disability and that we're talking about.
Through you, Mayor, certainly from the discussions that officers have had with Housing Choices Australia and reviewing the material that's available in relation to those entities, we're confident that they'd have that capacity, yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just want to, my question relates to the recommendation. The recommendation is that there's a Section 173 agreement so that the housing continues to be provided for at least 20 years. Does that mean after that period's expired that the authority that owns the land and housing could basically do what they want without any requirement to get a comment or come back to council after the 20 years, in other words?
Through you, Mayor, what that agreement would require is that the dwellings are used for social housing for the first 20 years. Beyond that, that obligation wouldn't apply. Obviously, any social housing provider that invests in housing in that way would look to build on their product in terms of the what they offer the community that they're trying to target with that housing. There may be choices made after 20 years that relate to selling that land and reinvesting it in other housing that increases or benefits those people. But in the first instance, that 20 years would be the limitation.
Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to tease out this answer, there may be, but my question clearly was whether there is anything stopping the Housing Authority after 20 years for just selling the housing off and doing whatever they want with it. I mean, it may not be the current people are managing the group, so my question's really clear.
Yep.
Is there anything stopping, after the 20 years, the relevant authority from just selling it off for whatever purpose they want to do it?
Through you, Mayor, the land could be sold at any time. The 173 agreement doesn't seek to stop someone from selling the land. What it does do is mean that for 20 years it has to be used for social housing. And after that time, that obligation wouldn't apply to whoever owned the land at the time.
So through the chair.
CEO.
So just to be clear also that if council passes a resolution tonight that includes a request to have a Section 173 on the title, that it would be framed in a way to say that the land can't be used for something other than social housing. Clearly, we wouldn't say you have to continuously use it if they don't have a tenant or they can't operate or whatever. Then there might be a period where it's not used, but it wouldn't be, under that proposal, allowed to be used for anything else. So we would frame wording to that effect. If there is a time limit, effectively a sunset on the limitation of use, I think that the answer you're looking for, to be clearer, is that if that sunset has been reached, then after that the requirement on the use wouldn't have any further restriction, even if the Section 173 sat on the title. Is that clearer, Councillor Hart? That does depend on the final wording, but I think that's what you're trying to get clarity about, yes?
Yeah, I think it's clear after the 20 years, if that's what the term is, they can basically do what they like with it.
Unless Council gives direction tonight that the Section 173 agreement has a different parameter in relation to that limitation of use, that would be correct.
Any other questions? No further questions? Well, as the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for consideration, does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Finnegan.
Yes, thank you. I believe there's one ready to go. So yep, that is the motion that I wish to move.
Do you want to...
Councillors will need some time, Chair, because this has been circulated after the meeting started.
So it's been circulated by email? Yep. Everyone had an opportunity to understand the motion? Yep, you can ask a question.
My question, and I'm not asking anyone to enter into debate at this stage, but my question is to the I think through you to the CEO, if this resolution is adopted, is that one that would be clear to the management what they're meant to do and is something that they can follow up?
Thanks, Councillor Hart. If this motion is carried at this meeting, then effectively officers would write to TW Projects, advise them of the decision and ask TW Projects to consider that and respond.
Councillor Potter, you'd like to ask a question?
Yeah, if I may, Mayor. Point 6 gives rise to a question that I have where it says a proposed partnership between Council and Disability Housing Limited. Have we had any discussions with Disability Housing Limited that may indicate that they'd be prepared to partner with Council?
Who'd like to answer that?
No, we haven't.
No. Mr McNeil, you'd like to make a comment?
I'd just like to point out, Mayor, that in point 4, the back end of that there says that TW Projects have been consulted and raised no objection to this agreement. They didn't raise an objection to the agreement in the context of them developing the 3 dwellings themselves with Disability Housing Limited, but they would have a different view about providing the 3 lots to Council potentially. So I don't think that would be accurate to include that part of the motion.
Thank you. Did you want to make a further comment?
I just think that point 4 is referring to the proposal of a Section 173 rather than the transfer of lots.
And it probably wouldn't be required if Council's requiring the 3 lots.
That's right.
Yeah, so
It's redundant.
so if we kill 4, 5 becomes...
So we're taking point 4 out, is that what you're proposing?
I think if it's redundant under this motion.
The Councillor Finnegan, my view would be that it's redundant because if TW Projects support the request, and they transfer the title to council. Council can then turn around and put its own Section 173 on when we're the landowner.
Yep. Yeah, I think if we remove Section 4, and so 5 now becomes 4 and 6 becomes 5. And then there was, in relation to, the other question was in relation to point 5, as brought up by Councillor Potter. There's still an issue that needs to be, it's been answered, so we could.
So we're clear on the motion? Yep. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter's opposing. You can still speak, Councillor Arnott. Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So I think that any social housing, particularly from developments, is always a good outcome, especially within our shire where we're lacking for options, I guess, in that space. However, my understanding was of the original, when the original sale was discussed by councillors, and like the intent was that the buyer would pass on a few lots for free for social housing to council as one of those options, and that there wouldn't be any money charged. My view is that, especially considering in the last item where we've agreed in this chamber to gift the site of McLaughlin Street in Apollo Bay to the community in Apollo Bay, to make use of that, if we can request that TW Projects, and state a preference that TW Projects provides this land to council free of charge, so we're able to facilitate a social housing outcome that won't cost this group $100,000 or so per lot, that will be a very good outcome for us in the Shire. And that's why I've wanted to move this slightly rejigged motion, and just noting that it still gets a social housing outcome for Shire. It just means that a group isn't having to fork out a none too sizable chunk of change to make that occur.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hart.
I'll reserve.
You
Thanks,
reserve.
Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I understand why this motion has been brought. I do have a couple of concerns with it. I think TW Projects probably entitled to recoup some money from their requirement to install some infrastructure to service these blocks, drainage, roads, gutters and all the rest of it. But looking ahead, TW Projects have got a major residential development on the books or in planning at the moment. Mick Baker and Baker Land have a significant residential development in the pipeline, plus there are others, and there's one down at Apollo Bay which is proceeding slowly. It's still there, but with those three developments alone, officers have approached those developers, including TWP, to look at providing some land for social and affordable housing. I'm concerned about the message this sends. Council has leverage over this land because it was our land. The other developments we don't, and we're relying on the goodwill of developers to partner with providers so that we achieve a community outcome of social and hopefully affordable working housing as well. This removes any incentive for people to do that other than their own social conscience and their willingness to be good corporate citizens. So that's my concern with this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Does any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Arnott. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I was somewhat surprised to see the proposal to sell those lots for TW projects to sell those lots for $100,000 each. I thought we were fairly clear that we wanted those blocks transferred free of charge. And I take Councillor Potter's point that other developers will be listening, be interested in what we propose here, but I think we've got to send a clear message that our expectation is that those lots will be provided for social housing free of charge. That's our message. That's what we wanted in the first place. And I think that's what we should stick to. And if we don't ask TW projects to do this, well, we'll never know. We'll never know whether they will or they won't. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. We want a social housing outcome from our developments, and I support that certainly. And the idea of free, I need to remind people, is a nonsense. There is no such thing as a free lunch. It comes as a cost and it must be paid for. Each block of land costs more to deliver as a result of this proposal. Every person who buys land within this development will pay a little bit more because the developer has to recoup the cost of providing these 3 lots. And if they're unable to recoup at least the cost of some of the services delivered to those lots, well, then that will be added to the cost of everybody else that buys land. And we have a fiduciary duty, I think, to not overburden the cost of land for people who want to build within our community. They've simply adhered to the contract that has been signed in goodwill between us. And so I think that as a good business transaction is what they would do. I don't have an expectation outside that. The council would incur costs as a result of this motion. We would have to accept it within our books. We'd have to do the transfer out. That will take time of our officers and staff and maybe legal advice to achieve these appropriate transfers. And we don't know what the level of the detail of the agreement between the build in the background with TW projects and this group are, what sort of services and assistance TW project are providing in order to assist with the total outcome. And I support Councillor Costin's comments in that we want Councillor Potter's comments, that we want good will of operating with others that are doing developments around town and with TW projects. We don't want to impose unrealistic imposts and costs that they need to recover from everyone else.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Like Councillor Costin, I had understood that the 3 blocks of land would be provided for social housing at no cost, yet we're hearing the developer is selling the blocks for around $100,000 each, so that's for $300,000. It is under market price. However, that is $300,000 that could otherwise have been used by the housing provider to build much needed social housing. And I dare say that the housing provider would see it as a positive improvement if they didn't have to pay that $300,000. I had understood that when council advertised the Bruce Street land for sale, that offers were invited on the basis that the 3 blocks for social housing would be provided at no cost. So that's already been incurred and built into the various offers from various parties to buy that land, that they should have, and I'm sure they did, took that into account. So this is not imposing extra costs on people who might buy the blocks, because the offer I had understood was clear that if you buy this Bruce Street land, you will have to give back 3 blocks of land. And that's what we should be asking to do. I have concerns with the social housing only being available for 20 years. And I think that that's something that needs to be approved on this arrangement. So I will support Councillor Finnegan's resolution. I think it is important that we go back, and again, I really have to say that I'm very disappointed that that this situation has come about like this, because I thought it was quite clear at the time the land went out for sale that there'd be no cost for these 3 blocks to come back. And in fact, some quarters even criticised council that you'll get a lower price for it because they'll have to pay for these 3 blocks of land, and that was a conscious and deliberate decision that the council took so there could be social housing. So I think we should be supporting Councillor Finnegan's resolution, and I commend them for bringing it to council today.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan?
Thank you very much. I guess in my right of reply and wrapping this up, if this motion passes, we're making a clear request, and it's not a demand to TW projects. And we're requesting they provide this land free so a social housing provider doesn't have to stump up $300,000 for the land. Now, TW projects, they can choose to say thanks, but no thanks to this resolution if it passes, or to this motion if it passes. And that is a perfectly valid option. But we'd hope that TW projects, being good corporate citizens, would forgo the extra $300,000 or so in revenue to ensure we're able to lessen the cost of housing some of our most vulnerable citizens. In fact, in my opinion, it was very clear that council intended for these three lots to be provided at no charge, and somehow it's managed to slip through. But we're in this position now, and this is an attempt to state a preference from council that, please provide this land. This land belonged to council, yes, but hopefully this sort of arrangement can be made with other developers of private land to contribute to the greater good of our shire and its livability into the future. And I'll put this forward for a vote. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried 4-3. Division, those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor Hart, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Hanson. Against? Councillor Potter, Councillor Arnott, Councillor White. Thank you. We now move on to item 9.4, appointments to committee and external organisations. The purpose of this report is to appoint council representatives to committees and external organisations. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin?
Mayor, would it be appropriate to take a break and fill in the blanks there in the resolution rather than go through them one by one?
I thought we'd filled in. Kate's got a question.
My question is just around the committees that will no longer have a councillor representation on them, the Central Reserve Advisory Committee, the Friends of the Colac Botanic Gardens and the Weeds Consultative Committee. I just wondered why we haven't got councillor representative on those committees.
Marlo?
No.
CEO?
I'll respond.
Thank you.
Sorry, our Manager of Governance is certainly the appropriate officer, but just to assist, I'll respond on this one. So thanks, Councillor Hanson. They are committees that have been able to go through the refresh under the adopted committee framework, and so those conversations have already been had with those 3 particular committees about how they fit in the framework, what's the type of committee, their purpose, etc. And the Friends of the Botanic Garden has progressed so far as to even have agreed to a new memorandum of understanding, and their new purpose and form, as reflected through the memorandum of understanding, is that they don't need a councillor, and they're very comfortable with that. They recognise that councillors have been fantastic support of that Friends of, but that they will have access to councillors regardless, etc. So they've basically gone through that process and got to this point themselves and let us know that they're comfortable. Central Reserve got there about 12 months ago, probably. They were quite early or close to that. Yeah, but they've been there for a fair while. And the Weeds Committee, that's had also a bit of a review and recognised that that committee actually isn't needed either. So they're down that journey of working within the framework council's adopted, and that's why they're no longer seeking councillor representation.
So just as a follow-up question, so any of those committees, if they wanted a councillor to come along, or a council officer can just make a request?
Yeah, I'm sure if there was an invitation sent out, I'm sure councils would be responsive and love to check in and see how they're doing.
Further questions? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to the Lake Colac Coordinating Committee, as we know, there is currently a review of the structure of that committee going on. However, a couple of councillors have put their hands up to go onto that committee. Would there be anything stopping? Would there be anything stopping that committee from requesting to meet and meeting with councillors while the review is undergoing?
There's nothing that stops the committee requesting to meet. There's no issue with that. The committee are more than just community members, so we know that agencies and authorities also are part of that committee. But the terms of reference haven't been reviewed or changed formally yet. They're not as far down the process that I just described, so yep, they could meet.
So just clarifying, the Lake Colac Coordinating Committee could request to meet at any time.
A member of the committee could request. Yep.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Through you, Mayor White.
Councillor Arnott.
Would a resolution to the effect that CEO Anne is asking for be valid if I suggested that we, rather than typing in all the names up there, we accept the list as being circulated to all of the councillors as being a substitute for that?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Arnott. We actually have been provided an indicative list, and so we have something prepared for you earlier.
Sorry, I hadn't seen that.
No, that's okay. That was being prepared in the background. So if a councillor is happy to move this or something like this, then that will help move it forward. Move a motion.
Okay. Any further questions? No further questions. So we have. I'll just scroll down, make sure. You're there. You're everywhere, Councillor Hart. There's many pages. And it should reflect the page I circulated. Okay, I have a recommendation. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Seconded. Councillor Arnott. To be opposed? Not to be opposed. Councillor Finnegan.
Just a quick one to say that, you know, these committees, it's a matter of course that we appoint councillors to different committees and the like, whether they be external organisations or committees that are consultative committees of council. I've been very lucky to have represented council on Timbertown since taking over from Councillor Potter at the AGM last year. Sorry, the AGM earlier this year, I should say. We're not quite into the new year. These committees are parts of what council do as part of their everyday duties. We're expected to be conduits with the community in these committees, and I think we all do a really, really good job at getting out there and soliciting feedback and the like. So
Thank you.
Put it forth.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Look, I acknowledge the comments by Councillor Finnegan that these aren't the daily duties, but we do get called to support our community with these committees. But I'd also like to thank the other more experienced councillors who have been on these committees before me and assisted me with those roles, and especially Councillor Hart, who is one of our longer-term councillors, and if you look at these committees, has been on one or most of them at some point in time, especially audit and risk, some of the heavier loads that he's been prepared to take on. So with that in mind, I second the motion.
Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Through you, thank you, Councillor Arnott, for that very generous comment. I just note that your comment earlier, Mayor, and that is meant to reflect that list, and that's my understanding. I think it does, and I hope it does, and I'll be supporting this resolution.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. It's quite a challenge. Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? You look happy. Councillors, I now call for a vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried 6-love. Thank you. 7. Sorry, there's 7 of us. I forgot myself. Item 9.5, Assessment of Audit and Risk Committee Performance. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the 22-23 assessment of the Audit and Risk Committee's performance against the Audit and Risk Committee Charter. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I just draw your attention, Mayor, to page 30, where it has in relation to organisational governance a rating of between 2 and 6. And there is some comments later on about the agenda, about some concerns about some reports. My question is, a rating of 2 doesn't look too good. What does it mean? And is there, have the issues, what were the issues that prompted this, and have they been addressed?
Who would like to answer that? CEO?
I'm happy to answer that. Clearly, just in terms of my understanding, because I'm not one of the members who participated in the survey, but we have had, as management, we've had conversations with the Audit and Risk Committee, independent members and council representatives about the quality, as this says, the quality of internal audit reports coming through. We've been proactive with the support of the chair of the, or previous chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, to provide that feedback to our internal auditor, and they've reviewed their processes, their checks, etc. And so that's how it's been reset, and we look forward to that picking up in the future.
Thank you, CEO. Any further questions? No further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Arnott. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Whilst I've only attended one of these meetings, I was actually impressed with the processes that largely that it followed, and also, whilst I have also not been involved in the background of the creation of this report, I look forward to my opportunity to do so, but I commend it to Council.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Potter?
No, nothing from me, Mayor.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. This is obviously a very important committee, and as those councillors who've served on it, and that's probably most of us at different times, it is a very involved and comprehensive committee. What I take from page 30 is not necessarily a bad thing. I take from it that the audit committee members are actively prepared to raise any concerns, and I think we can take some comfort from the fact that the CEO's aware of what those, in broad terms, what those concerns were, and has taken steps to address them. So I don't see that in a bad light, because there's a response to that outcome.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillor wish to speak? No other councillor wishes to speak. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried 7-0. Vote is carried. Moving right along. Now we move to item 9.6, Quarterly Performance Report, July to September. The purpose of this report is to provide the quarterly performance report for the period July 1 to 30th of September 2023. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to the matter? Councillor Finnegan, seconded. Councillor Costin. Councillor Finnegan. Oh, sorry, is it to be opposed? Not to be opposed. Councillor Finnegan? No, you don't wish to make any statement. Councillor Costin?
Thank you, Mayor. If I could thank the CEO and the staff involved for preparing this report. It's an important part of our transparency back to our community. It's part of it is a requirement of the Local Government Act, but we go beyond that and we report against our annual plan also, our council plan and our annual plan. So thank you to the officers who prepared this report.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to echo the words of Councillor Costin, but I did just want to highlight in the report, Mayor, under theme 3, healthy and inclusive community, it's on page 73 of the agenda, just in relation to diversity, multiculturalism, and also in relation to our reconciliation action plan in consultation with Eastern Mar. We can see that we haven't completed those yet and it's not started. And I just want to highlight that perhaps councillors, when we're considering the budget, whether there's some consideration to some budgetary support to staff or officers, so we can get that work undertaken and completed.
Councillor Potter. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Just at the snapshot on page, 41 of the finances, it talks about additional employee costs and such. Most of that was in the aged care administration area. That was linked, my understanding, to actually delivery of services. So we're actually expanding our services to our community, which I think is a really good thing. To do that, we obviously need people, so those people need obviously paid salary. So that's what that's in relation to, is to provide a better and more expanded service to our community. We have made a favourable budget result so far to this year. It's only just preliminary for the start, so bless people not get too excited about one particular quarter, but it is nice to see it heading in the right direction. And like Councillor Potter, I commend the work of our executive and employees to achieving this outcome so far. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Back to you, Councillor Finnegan, for a closing statement.
Other than to just echo the words of other councillors and again thank officers for preparing this report and showing us and giving us a pretty comprehensive look of where we're at for the year thus far. So.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? 7 against. Carried 7-0. Thank you, councillors. We've got to get going. Kate has to leave us now, so this might be an appropriate time to take a 5-minute break. Can we come back in at 1:45? Thank you. 550. And we're now moving on to item 9.7, Community Asset Committee Annual Report 22-23. The purpose of this report is to present the 22-23 annual report in relation to activities and performance of community asset committees within Colac Otway Shire. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart.
I'll cut to it, Mayor. I have an alternative because I understand that council management's happy that or acknowledges that some information has been received, so I have a slight alternative to the recommendation. When you're ready.
Okay, well, let's see if anyone else has got questions. No questions? Okay, so you'd like to move a motion?
Mayor White, so if I
sorry,
may.
Councillor Arnott, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to... I did have a question written down in respect to this. Just, Councillor White, Mayor, just acknowledging some of the difficulties, and it goes to the heart, I guess, of what Councillor Hart is going to be talking about with his particular motion. I believe there's been some difficulties with experience with on-the-ground experience with the expectation of the state government requirements and legislation that we must work with within these committees. Can you speak to that? Someone speak to that, maybe Anne, please.
CEO, would you like to make a comment?
Thanks, Councillor Arnott, through the chair. The Local Government Act introduced in 2020 did change the framework for community-led, community-based committees looking after council assets, and the new Community Asset Committee structure that's included in the Local Government Act 2020 has some differences, but fundamentally the expectation about what a committee might do versus what council might do directly probably hasn't changed. But nonetheless, there is a different framework, and as we've tried to implement that in Colac Otway Shire, we've kind of learned that probably maybe the expectation or the desired role, preferred role of the committee members themselves in the community might not best fit the new framework. And so I think that we'll have to have a good discussion with councils around reviewing whether the implementation of the community asset committees is going to be the best model for the community.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Any further questions? No. So, councillors, we have a recommendation with the report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion?
Well, yes, I would like to move something, but I'm not entirely happy with how it's written, given that this is my resolution, if you like. So, point 3, I would ask that just notes that Lavers Hill Community Asset Committee has provided council with some information. Just information, has provided information and thanks the committee for that information. I mean, one of the things I'm going to discuss, if it's seconded, is the I don't think we should nail down and say the information is alternative information. I just want to acknowledge that they've provided some information and thank them for that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hart, does that read as you want it to read now?
No, I don't think the delete key's been put. It would say that notes that Lavers Hill Hall Community Asset Committee has provided council with information and thanks the committee for that information. Without any commentary on what it is.
Thank you. Is everyone clear about that? Do I have a seconder? We're still clarifying Councillor Hart's.
Yeah, I think some removed. I mean, all I'm asking that point 3 does is acknowledging that they have effectively sent in some information without a commentary on whether it's considered to be the information that was requested.
Okay, so that reads how you want it to read.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. So I have a seconder. Councillor Arnott, is it to be opposed? Not to be opposed. Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'd like to put on record in talking to this resolution my thanks, and I'm sure Council's thanks, for the many people who are involved in these various committees, managing various facilities throughout Colac Otway Shire. I think the changes in the Local Government Act, and to be quite candid, how a council previous to the current management sought to manage that, has created some angst in relation to the people on these committees. Some councillors will remember how councillor was saying, well, you must form an association, and that process was pursued some years ago under a previous council and is no longer being pursued and never had to be pursued. It was saying to these committees you have to perform an association, become incorporated, and then sign some management agreement. Now, that's no longer being pursued and was a misunderstanding, if I can put it that way, of some years ago. But this is partly contributed to the angst. But also contributed to the angst is some of the requests for information that has arisen indirectly from the Local Government Act changes, such as committees having to list, for example, how much, all the different assets that they have and when they were acquired and when they were, how much they've been depreciated. And in the case of the Lavers Hill Hall, for example, which I have I'm familiar with them, of course, they're down the road. Some of those bits of equipment are things like crockery sets that have been donated and glasses and all the rest of it. So there's some very onerous paperwork being asked for, but I acknowledge that stems from some of the changes in the Local Government Act. The Lavers Hill Hall has provided information on the use of the hall. It's a well-used hall, and in the short time I have available, I'll give you some examples. In the year under review, there's yoga in the Otways, which is an exercise group. Occurs 4 times a week with 1,500 attendances. A movement class, which is a different exercise group, 250 attendances for the year. Fog Suckers ukulele music group, 200 attendances for the year. Spring Yoga, another exercise group, they like their yoga in Lavers Hill, 20 attendances. A healing group, 10. Festival of Small Halls, 100. Progress Association meetings, Hall Committee meetings. Weddings, I'm quite familiar with some of the weddings that occurred during that year. 500 attendances overall. And interesting one that I think Council has to consider, keep in mind, state election, federal election polling booths. And I think when we're setting our fees, don't tell anyone, but those entities are prepared to pay a little bit more than you might charge the local person who's just going to yoga class. So they do a great job, all these committees. I'm just using Lavers Hill as an example, but I think we need to do some work to try to mitigate all these requirements, which are some becoming quite onerous in terms of the information that has to be provided. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. I'd like to just acknowledge Councillor Hart's comments and support them. The role of committee members is often a thankless task and held often by people with little extra time available to them. And so, like Councillor Hart, I also commend the people who have been able to provide that service for us. There's an obvious difficulty in complying with the new government regulations, as Councillor Hart has explained. And so these regulations are made up by people with probably good intentions, but with maybe a little understanding of its practical implication on the ground. And Councillor Hart has given us some details around that. Our CEO, Anne, has explained that we will do our best to review the process with our committees to ensure that we can get an appropriate process and outcome. So thank you.
Councillor Arnott, does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that the Apollo Bay Community Asset Committee report is not included in there, and there was some difficulty in providing that report. And we had 2 questions submitted at the start of this council meeting relating to those difficulties. And we do need to keep in mind that the community asset committees are often made up of the same people who run neighbourhood house and playgroups and other things. Often they're young mums, so they're pretty time poor. And I thank the CEO in providing her response to those questions, that we will discuss that further in the new year. Thank you.
Any other councillor wish to speak? No? No? Okay, councillors, I will now call for a vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. I said 6. I got it right, 6. Item 9.8, project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfers, December 2023. The purpose of this report is to present the project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfers for council ratification and approval. These budgets are for 23-24 capital works and operational projects. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor Arnott, do I have a seconder? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? Councillor Arnott.
I'll note that this is not to be opposed because it's obviously a piece of another piece of an example of good governance by this organisation that's been put forward by our executive and staff, and I thank them for that. They keep us significantly well informed on the progress of the organisation, not just through our quarterly reports, as we saw before, but on an ongoing basis with this type of thing, which shows us where projects are at, where we may need to put funds forward, and sometimes where we actually save money. So in that context, I continue to thank our staff for the work that they do, and point out to everyone that's maybe listening, our staff are our most important asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott. Councillor Costin?
Thank you, Mayor. Sad as it may sound, this is one report I enjoy reading, and I'd just like to say thank you to the officers for preparing this report and for the transparency it provides, and the not just transparency but also an accountability back to council. So thank you, officers.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No other councillor wishes to speak. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report. I've gone backwards, sorry. I'm now calling for a vote. Or unless we've got a summary statement. No? No. Let's call for a vote. All those in favour? 6-0.
Thank you for the opportunity for summary, but it was needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 9.9, provision of labour hire services. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the contract in relation to MAV, that's the Municipal Association of Victoria, contract RS 8017-2015NV, neutral vendor managed service, the contract that provides for the supply of temporary labour hire services by Comensura. Do the councillors have any questions of officers? No questions? One question, Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor White. Can you advise us whether the amount of use or expenditure in this contract has increased or decreased over time?
Through the Chair, Councillor Arnott, I think that we've been pleased to see a decrease over time.
Has there been a driver for that decrease, you believe?
Yeah, we've recognised that it's a significant cost to council under this contract in past years. And so we've had a real focus on trying to recruit. Our preference is always to have employees doing our work, and so we've had a focus on finding people who can join us on an ongoing basis. Although we do value the skills that we can access, and they're important people in our workplace as much as possible, we want them on staff. So we've had a real focus on that and been pretty successful.
Thank you.
Any other questions of officers? Further questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to the matter? Councillor Potter, is it be seconded? Councillor Arnott, is it to be opposed? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, just a little bit of housekeeping, really, just to tidy up the operation of this contract over the next couple of months, and we'll consider a report in February. So I hope everyone will support it.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Councillor Arnott, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor White. This is just acknowledging that the delivery of projects and services to our community does require people to do that for us. Our preference as a council is to actually employ people where we can and where it's practical to do so, to deliver those services on a permanent basis. But there are many occasions where it's actually prudent and appropriate to employ good people through these sort of contract services, and for that we need these sort of services to deliver that outcome for us. Because I know that we do have good people from this organisation working side by side with our permanent staff, and so it should be. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No? Thank you. Councillors, I will put it to a vote. All those in favour? 6-0, carried. Getting croaky in the voice. So now we move on to item 9.10, the revocation of the authorised officer under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The purpose of this report is to revoke the instrument and appointment and authorisation for Heath Chasemore, who is no longer employed by council. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Finnegan, seconded Councillor Costin. Thank you. Councillor Finnegan, do you wish to speak? Councillor Costin, do you wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? Thank you. Councillors, I will now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-0. Item 9.11, report of informal meeting of councillors. The purpose of this report is to report the informal meeting of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. Councillors, we now move to a closed session. The remaining items for consideration for council are to be heard in a closed session. Councillors, we have a recommendation before us that pursuant to the provisions of the Section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the public and council move into a closed session in order to deal with the following. Minutes of the closed session council meeting held on the 24th of May 2023 under the Local Government Act. Keep going. Well, I'll just finish reading what I'm reading here. On the basis of this matter deals with confidential information being records of meetings closed to the public under section 66(2)A, and the other issue is Wye River Road issues under the Local Government Act 2020, section 3(1)A. On the basis of this matter deals with the business information being information which, if released, would result in the unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs. Does any councillor wish to move a motion to move into a closed session? Councillor Finnegan, seconded Councillor Potter. Is it to be opposed? Councillors, I will now call a vote. All those in favour? Against? The vote is carried 6-0. This concludes the open part of the month's council meeting. Thank you for joining us. The meeting will now be closed to the public to allow for the hearing of the closed session items on the agenda, and for this reason